Hey everyone, Brian Zane here with the latest Raw review here on Wrestling with Regret. I'm back after my 1-week vacation from the nightly wrestling shows, and I'm back here on my brand new office chair because this morning the wheel on my old one broke, and I gotta tell you, this one feels really nice, y'all. Raw opens up with a moment of bliss, some subtle differences between the moment of bliss of old and this one. In particular, there is a doll trapped in a cage sitting between the two chairs now. Alexa's guest here is Randy Orton. Alexa shows the clip from last week where The Fiend cost Orton his match against AJ Styles last week for the qualifier for the triple threat later tonight. Orton talking about his history with Bray and their similarities and their differences. He brings up how he found Bray's weakness before, finding the compound, burning to the ground. So now he has to find the Fiend's new weakness. He looks at Alexa and he says, I think I found that weakness. Alexa asks who's manipulating who. The lights begin to cut out. We get these dramatic pauses between when the lights cut out and some banter traded between Orton and Alexa. The lights, they go all the way out. They come back up and now Orton is holding Alexa in his arms and the Fiend is there on the other side of the ring. And the Fiend very urgently wants Orton to pass off Alexa back to him. There's a tense moment there before the handoff. Orton does hand Alexa to Bray, bails out of the ring and says, who's laughing now? Interesting role reversal here, and it does feel kind of like, why can't Bray Wyatt get one over on Randy Orton for a sustained period of time? Why does Orton have to be the one to outsmart or to out-manipulate Bray Wyatt? We saw it a few years ago in the build to WrestleMania 33, and we see it again here. Obviously, this is pretty early in the storyline, so it's hard to make that direct comparison. I do kind of like the role reversal here of, Orton, it's kind of with both people, both characters, Bray and Orton. You don't really know what side of the face heel spectrum they're on right now. Is Orton a babyface because he's going after this evil Fiend character? Or then again, the Fiend and Alexa do seem to be presented as babyfaces sometimes, depending on if the plot requires it. So they're definitely both in tweener mode right now, which could lead to some interesting developments in this angle, and I'm definitely interested right now at least. In what's billed as the final chapter in their feud, Elias and Jeff Hardy face off in the third ever Symphony of Destruction match. Elias has been in all three of these. This time, though, no endless Megadeth puns from Corey Graves on commentary. Early in the match, you see R-Truth hiding in a piano. He's chased by some of the people for the 24/7 shenanigans. Hardy and Elias beat up Drew Gulak and the Lucha House Party before we go to break. Near the end of the match, Elias mildly electrocutes himself by stabbing a guitar neck into an amplifier. Hardy hits him with a stand-up bass, puts him on a table, does a big swanton from the top rope to the outside, through the table, and in doing so, slams the back of his head and neck right on the bottom step. It looked so horrifying. I thought he would have broken his neck or his skull on impact, but miraculously, Hardy is not only still alive to cover Elias and to win, but he even picks up the nearby tambourine and starts shaking it to the music. Oh, he's okay, folks. He's fine now. So yeah, entertaining brawl with a slightly scary finish, but overall, the match is pretty fun. Backstage, Riddle approaches Keith Lee and is very excited about the triple threat match these two are going to be in later on. Lee, however, very uninterested in hearing what he has to say. The camera pans over to Riddle as he does a bad Scottish accent, pans back, and Lee has miraculously disappeared. Elsewhere backstage, Mustafa Ali and Retribution are there, and Ali says everything happening to Ricochet right now is what happened to the members of Retribution beforehand, and that Ricochet should be standing alongside them. Slapjack saying, Ali saw something in him that no one else did when he was left as a worthless husk of a man or something, and now he's a weapon of Retribution. We go to that match now as Slappy Jack takes on Rico. Not much to this match, though, unfortunately. The rest of Retribution show up on the outside, and Rico dives on all of them. Elsewhere on the outside, Dana Brooke shows up and slaps Ali. They say on commentary later it's a revenge for what happened a couple weeks ago when Reckoning, Mia Yim, took her out of the Survivor Series match a couple weeks before this. And then in all that happening, Slapjack hits his finisher on Ricochet to win the match. And so I just wonder how many more weeks Ricochet will be fighting the members of Retribution and losing to them before he ultimately decides to not join the group. It's time for Miz TV with special guest SHEAMUS. Miz and Morrison try to stir the pot between SHEAMUS and his friend Drew McIntyre, saying, hey, Drew never returned the favor when you gave him that sword and that kilt, and says, you should turn on Drew tonight so we can cash in the Money in the Bank. It's pretty much what they're saying. SHEAMUS laughs it off, but Miz calls SHEAMUS's career a joke as of late. They face off. SHEAMUS strikes first, but the numbers game is too much, and they beat him up with a briefcase and stuff and leave him laying there. And where was SHEAMUS's good friend Drew McIntyre to make the save? Well, last week, the women's title match between Asuka and Lana, I'm glad I skipped last week, ended in a schmoz when the tag team champions Nia Jax and Shayna-BASZLER got involved, and that turned into an impromptu tag team match where the makeshift team beat the champions in a non-title affair. So here's another rematch, non-title style. We get some tension between the champions before the match as they try and place blame on each other for who deserved blame for losing last week. Early in the match, Nia is, I believe, supposed to fall out of the ring when Lana pulls down a rope, but instead there's just this delay, and Nia just runs herself out of the ring apropos of nothing going on. Oh, Nia, never change. Lana barely keeps herself alive here when she tags in Asuka in the match. Lana blind tags herself back in and goes for a dive, but Shayna counters with a Kirifuda clutch. Asuka breaks it up with a knee, and that's all it takes for Lana to fall on top of Shayna to pin and win. So Lana finally was able to do what almost nobody else in NXT could do, save for Rhea Ripley, and I can't think of anyone else really, and that's pin Shayna-BASZLER clean as a whistle in the ring. I just cannot wait to see how this angle is going to end. It's going to culminate in Lana winning a championship. I just can't wait to see how they're going to continue to wow us with performances like what we saw tonight. Backstage, Drew McIntyre has a bit of a laugh at Sheamus' expense over the beatdown earlier in a friendly way, of course. Sheamus is able to shrug it off pretty quickly, though, and says he's ready to take Miz and Morrison's heads off with some brogue kicks. Up next, we've got Xavier Woods taking on Cedric Alexander of the Hurt Business. It's part of this next several weeks angle where they have the two teams face off in singles matches, it seems, leading up to the inevitable tag team title rematch. Xavier, by the way, celebrating being named the newest host of the revived G4 network. He has a very heartfelt thanks to the fans who supported his Up, Up, Down, Down channel over the years and whatnot. So that's really cool to see for Xavier. And then they talk about their recent confrontation with the Hurt Business via flashback wipes, which I thought was pretty awesome. The Hurt Business show up and they say they will soon become the tag team champions. Cedric is very aggressive from the word go here. Not only does he get right up in Xavier's face on the microphone, he jumps Xavier before the bell rings as the match begins, and he goes after him relentlessly throughout. Ultimately wins with a lumbar check and is just very much full of himself afterward. He's celebrating on an island all by himself while Shelton Benjamin and MVP look on kind of perturbed at just how boisterous he's been in all this. Maybe it will be Cedric's fire and his ability, or his inability, I should say, to control himself that could lead to a possible downfall in the future. Time will tell. Riddle chats with AJ Styles and his bodyguard almost backstage, and AJ's very annoyed at Riddle's banter here. Riddle compares AJ to his pet rabbit Skipper because he's got hops, he's furry, and he's cute. AJ has no time for Riddle's guff but almost finds it hilarious. We go to the sudden death triple threat match now. Styles, Riddle, and Keith Lee. They all won qualifying matches last week, and the winner of this match will face Drew McIntyre for the title at TLC. This match is pretty entertaining. I think all three guys get to show off, showcase their abilities and their strengths in this matchup here. It finally ends when Riddle lays out Lee with some strikes, and then he's taken out with a phenomenal forearm by Styles. Styles pins and wins, going to the pay-per-view. He's going to be Drew's next challenger, which should be pretty darn entertaining on paper. Backstage, Miz and Morrison seem very happy with all the meddling they've been doing as of late, but Troy Caruso points out it does not appear like you guys have a plan in all this. Morrison says he's got an idea. We'll see what those guys do later in the night. But first, we've got Dana Brooke taking on Reckoning from Retribution. As I mentioned earlier, Dana's looking for revenge after Reckoning took her out of the Survivor Series match a few weeks ago. Seconds into this matchup, Reckoning's mask falls off, and it's, oh my god, it's Mia Yim. I'm shocked, I tell you, but God bless the announce team. They do not break, and they just keep calling her Reckoning. As far as we know, that's just her new name. We're going to ignore her past at NXT and all that stuff. And so, yeah, she's technically the first one to be unmasked and all this, so history made here in this matchup. Ollie's on the apron to distract Dana, but it does not pay off. Dana's able to roll up Reckoning to win. Mustafa is upset after the match and just berates Mia Yim, Reckoning, saying, "There's no failure in Retribution," the same group that got jobbed out like fools in the first couple weeks of them doing in-ring stuff. Backstage, Miz and Morrison bribe AJ Styles with a peach pie because he's from Georgia. AJ can see right through what they're doing here and says, "I will help you guys soften up Drew later tonight," because he says it'll be easier to beat Miz for the championship at TLC than it'll be to beat Drew, which Morrison actually agrees to before Miz kind of shoots a look at him. And so AJ tells him to leave, but he keeps the pie. Elsewhere backstage, MVP approaches Riddle about losing earlier, and Riddle mocks Lashley for not qualifying last week, makes some thinly veiled weed and munchies jokes before Lashley jumps him from behind, puts the hurt lock on him, very much setting up, what seems to be a program with these these two going into the pay-per-view. Man, 3 backstage segments in one night for Riddle here. Just kind of going around talking to people and bugging people and stuff. I'm kind of liking this vibe I'm getting from Riddle here, and I think if they kind of keep this energy up, I think he'd be very entertaining with these backstage bits. Elsewhere, still backstage, Keith Lee approaches Sheamus and wants to know if he'll turn on his friend Drew McIntyre. Then Sheamus says, none of your business. Now, if you'll excuse me, I swear to God, he says, I'm going to go turn on my friend Drew McIntyre. Maybe he said something different and the acoustics may sound different than what it was, or maybe he was being sarcastic, but I'm almost certain he said, I'm going to turn on my friend Drew McIntyre before he walks away. So maybe it's foreshadowing for the future, who knows? Before our main event, we have the much hyped in-ring interview with the new champion, Drew McIntyre. They spent all night hyping him up and showing the big things he's accomplished this year, like winning the Royal Rumble, winning at WrestleMania, regaining the championship a couple weeks ago on Raw. So he's on the microphone here and he talks about how it takes, getting knocked in your ass to figure out what kind of man you are. He talks about how he made good in his promise he was going to beat Orton for the championship again. And he said he made Roman Reigns lose his confidence at Survivor Series the longer he stayed in the fight. And even though he lost the battle, he will win the war. He talks about his match with AJ Styles coming up, saying it'll be phenomenal. And he tells Miz to hold on to the briefcase because it's the only thing keeping him relevant. We go to that main event match now as Sheamus and Drew take on The Miz and Morrison. AJ Styles joins commentary for this matchup here. Sheamus takes the brunt of the heat in this match, then Drew with the hot tag House of Fire. But then in the end, AJ hits Drew with the forearm to cause a disqualification. AJ is pressuring The Miz to cash in the briefcase. Seems kind of reluctant at first, but then he ultimately decides to do it. But before anything official happens, Drew claymores Miz into oblivion. He stares down AJ, who does a backflip out of over the ropes and into the waiting arms and shoulder of Omos, who carries him on his shoulder as AJ keeps talking shit to him while he's up there, which is the funniest thing I've seen all day. I just love that. If we could just get a running gag of Omos carrying AJ around in and out of shots like Dave Chappelle playing P. Diddy, then that would be absolutely amazing. But we have Drew standing tall in the ring as Omos carries AJ as we fade to black. So yeah, not much of a spectacular match in the main event, but does set up a lot of different storylines we got going on here. Like I said before, when Orton had a bunch of people targeting him, I like when there's multiple people gunning for the champion of any championship because it makes that scene feel a lot more urgent, and that's kind of what we're getting here right now. My grade for this week's Raw is a C+. Not a very wild episode this week, but they did have some good forward momentum for a couple of TLC storylines, a couple of interesting angles going on, like Orton versus Wyatt and Drew versus everybody, not just The Miz and Morrison, not just AJ Styles, but some kind of percolating tension, it seems, between Sheamus and Drew McIntyre. I think the women's matches we saw tonight weren't that good, and I'm not looking forward to where we're going to go with the Lana storyline. Don't do what I think you're going to do and put a championship on her, guys, because if you heard my Survivor Series review about Lana's face turn, you know why I have a problem with it. And it's not just because, oh, it's Lana, it's just how she's been booked and portrayed all this time. I still don't see why we're supposed to cheer for her. That's a story for a whole other time, though. But what did you all think of Raw this week? Let me know in the comments section below. One final note, we are in the thick of holiday shopping season right now, and if you're looking for something for the young wrestling fan in your life, might I suggest this new children's book I've written, Pro Animal Wrestling, A Guide to Pro Wrestling. It's written by me and illustrated by my good friend Jorge Uribe. It's got 30 full color pages plus a black and white glossary with a colorful cast of imaginative wrestling animal characters, teaching you all about the ins and outs of what wrestling really is all about. It's for a 3rd or 4th grade reading level, but it's fun for all ages. Some great color pictures here. If you want to get in on this and order one of these books for yourself or for a wrestling fan in your life, you can email me wrestlingwithregret@gmail.com. Let me know what country you're in, because I'm charging $15 for US and Canada, $20 for everywhere else, and so you'll get a PayPal invoice and I will send one of these bad boys to you. It'll be autographed. I have less than 50 copies of this book available, so get while the getting's good. Pro Animal Wrestling, A Guide to Pro Wrestling, available now. Email me at wrestlingwithregret@gmail.com for more information. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.